Well, Prince Charles and Duchess Camilla will arrive at the National War Memorial. Of course, they'll be met with some service members, and the Governor General will be there as well. Prince Charles will lay a wreath. Duchess of Cornwall, Camilla, will lay a bouquet on the tomb of the unknown soldier. Of course, this is really a way to, pay homage to the veterans that have served in many wars. Of course, the royal family and the Queen has an important role within the military, especially here in Canada. The Queen is our head of state, and that is a very important, symbol within the military as well. So a lot of symbolism of unity and fighting against struggle there. And then after that ceremony, the National War Memorial, the Prince and Duchess will come here to this Ukrainian cathedral, where they will meet with parishioners, the priest as well. There'll be a prayer for peace, of course, a real focus on the conflict in Ukraine. The priest actually giving the service inside the cathedral has recently come from Ukraine. Actually had some difficulty getting out. Of course, at the beginning of that conflict, if you remember, Marcia, it was very difficult for men to get out of the country. Many men were required to stay. Now, the priest had plans to come to Canada long before Russia invaded Ukraine. And so really this is a moment where Prince Charles and Camilla will ask for a solution, a resolution to this conflict that's, taking so many lives and displaced so many people. The prince will also have an opportunity to meet with a Ukrainian mother who's recently been displaced because of the conflict, who's come here to Canada with her two sons. The father was not unable to join his family here in Canada. This is certainly something that they'll talk about. They're also going to talk about the fundraising efforts, and there'll be an opportunity for the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall to make some pierogies, which will also be sold as part of a fundraising effort that will go towards helping Ukrainian refugees.
Oh boy, we said busy, we meant it. Okay, so the wreath laying ceremony is expected to last about 15 minutes, and then they're moving on to the church, Kevin. And as far as those who will be at the cathedral, again, can you just go over who's going to be greeting the royal couple once they get there?
No, certainly there is a member of Parliament, Yvonne Baker, who's been from Etobicoke, obviously very involved with the Ukrainian community, is of Ukrainian descent. Also, there will be the priest here, who's an Orthodox priest that has come from Ukraine. His first sermon actually was on the Saturday just before Orthodox Easter. So very recent arrival here and very new to the parish. And there will be many parishioners. Of course, there's been a lot of fundraising and donation efforts that have been spearheaded by the people who are part of this community here within the west part of Ottawa. And of course, really a way for this group of parishioners here at the Ukrainian Cathedral to talk about the importance of the Ukrainian diaspora. Of course, 1.4 million Canadians claim Ukrainian descent. After this ceremony here, of course, the meetings don't stop. As you mentioned, Mercy, it's an action-packed day. The Prince and Duchess will head to the historic Byward Market. They'll meet with the mayor of Ottawa and also many other people who have shops there as well. I don't know if you are seeing anything up on your monitor.
I just want to jump in here, Kevin. Sorry, we're now seeing the Governor General arrive along with her husband. And I understand it that in the vehicle next to them, we're going to see Prince Charles and the Duchess Camilla momentarily. I want to bring in CTV's Richard Berthelsen, our royal commentator, right now. Richard, good morning to you. I was commenting to Kevin Gallagher just a few moments ago. What a lovely day it is in the nation's capital, and as a result, we're seeing a pretty sizable crowd outside the War Memorial.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice day for a May work and school day. So you're not going to get huge crowds, but I mean, it's the weather's certainly helping, and it's certainly a respectable crowd around the War Memorial. This is the principal event at which members of the public will be able to see their Royal Highnesses, and it's a very central place in Ottawa as well. Of course, the Governor General has arrived by virtue of her position as Governor General and Commander-in-Chief of Canada. She, of course, is acting as His Royal Highness's official host. They were, of course, staying with the Governor General at Rideau Hall. So this is all part of the protocol that is required. And this is really one of the most, this probably in the RCMP Musical Ride are probably the most protocol-oriented events on this tour. The rest of it is much, much more informal and a lot of listening rather than anything else.
So why would this wreath laying ceremony be significant to the prince, to the future king?
Well, I mean, I think that, during a visit to the national capital or for any royal tour, there's going to be some moment at which the visitor is going to express, memorialization of those who've passed and served this country in times of war. That is always going to be a part of the tour. And of course, the prince has a central role with the Canadian Forces. He is colonel of 7 regiments in the Canadian Forces. He will ultimately be the commander-in-chief of all forces in that sense. The other thing about the War Memorial, which is interesting, is that it is a location that has a real history with the crown and the royal family. It was opened, it was dedicated in 1939 by King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, who became the Queen Mother, during their epic 1939 royal tour of Canada. So it has always been central to that. And let's remember that particularly in the First and Second World Wars, people served and thought they were serving queen or king and country. That is how they characterized their service. They're still doing that now. We don't think of it in the same way. So these are people who laid down their lives in service of the country, in the service of the king. And that is why it is really important that members of the royal family do not break that covenant. And
Richard,
they continue to honor that.
Okay, hang with me. We just want to take a bit of this sound as we see Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall arrive and get out of their vehicles.
I'd like to introduce Master Warrant Officer Tolton of Garrison, Ottawa, who will be leading us
So, Richard, the royal couple being introduced to Master Warrant Officer Martin Tolton, and don't know if you caught it, but a fun little moment there where I believe one of the Duchess's handlers took her handbag, presumably so that her hands would be free so she could lay a bouquet at the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Yeah, I mean, the protocol around this is really important. In fact, what they were also learning from the Master Warrant Officer is exactly how this is going to happen. Kind of a quick little briefing.
Dry run, yeah.
So that they do it properly, because it's there is an expectation and a custom and a tradition in each Commonwealth country about how this takes place, and they want to do the absolute right thing. So it's very, very important. And of course, this is a very significant location. There's been a lot of discussion about it earlier this year, but it also is the resting place of a soldier from the First World War whose identity is unknown. So it is a grave in that sense. So it is a highly significant place, and it has been, as I say, the focal point of Canadian remembrance since 1939. And it was built to commemorate the First World War. Of course, they have since added the dates of other wars, Second World War, Korea, Afghanistan, and other conflicts, because now it encapsulates all wars in which Canadians have, in fact, served and died. And of course, we see the Prince of Wales wearing, over his time there, the Order of Military Merit, which he received this morning from the Governor General. It's the highest a kind of rank you can get in that order for members of the Canadian Forces for their exceptional service to Canada.
All right, and I do believe, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong. Nope, here we go.
You can do a puller to reveal the unknown soldier if you want. Okay, we know to start. Oh, this is Peter saying that. Oh.
the piper playing the lament, we will now see His Royal Highness and Her Royal Highness proceed to the tomb of the unknown soldier. Prince Charles will place a wreath on the stand, and the Duchess of Cornwall will place a bouquet on the tomb of the unknown soldier. And now the wreath bearer escorting the royal couple to the guest book table to sign the Veterans Affairs Canada guest book. So Richard Berthelsen, I'm going to bring you back in here as we watch Prince Charles and the Duchess Camilla be escorted back to the royal party. They're going to be going back to their motorcade and then moving on as they bid farewell to their host, the Governor General. In terms of an event like this being choreographed, Richard, they're a little bit behind schedule, but it went off very smoothly, and now they move on to their next event at the cathedral.
Yeah, unlike the Queen, the Prince of Wales tends to run a little behind schedule, and it's partly because he takes time a little bit more to speak with people than is sometimes anticipated, and that's the norm. So he runs a bit behind, but I mean, you know, the whole day is just going to be one big scheduling. People looking at their watches, because there's a lot of chatting, there's a lot of opportunity to talk to people throughout the day, and so it's really a significant factor. But I mean, that's the nice part of it is that he will speak to people. Now, we did see the bugler play the last post and the rouse to summon the spirits to the cenotaph of those who've departed, and then at the conclusion, the rouse to come back. In other words, we carry on with life.
Oh, let's see if the royal couple will greet some of the crowd that's there.
So here's an exact example
as to why they go behind schedule.
Yeah, yes, because the prince will not, walk by people without chatting. And of course, there's people all around that square, so there's really only a limited number. This is by the cars of people that are going to get that chance. Those are very strategic people who chose to stand there, I will tell you.
Very nice. Okay, we'll wait and see if our camera swings around and if we can get a shot of the couple. So from here, Richard, they move on to the cathedral, and this is going to be, again, another moving, emotional moment in their tour of Ottawa today.
Yes. I think it's a very significant moment, and it really dovetails well with this because, of course, the Canadian Forces have been central figures in a lot of ways in training Ukrainian armed forces for the conflict that they are now engaged in. So we move directly now to dealing with people who are refugees, who are the diaspora in Canada, who are, watching events very, very closely. And the Prince will be expressing his solidarity with them. And of course, the solidarity of all Canadians, with the situation that has resulted in these last little while.
And we'll just capture a little bit of the sound as Charles and Camilla make their way along that line. We did see one protester there, Richard Berthelsen, holding up a sign.
Well, it is a free country, and people fought for the people who fought in wars and laid down their lives fought for the right for people to express themselves. So that is not something that's unusual. I don't think anywhere the Prince goes in many of the realms in which he is a prince, is that there will be different views expressed, and I think he's comfortable with that.
Richard, do you think that we can expect to see Charles and Camilla take on more of these trips? Given the Queen's health, we did see her out yesterday at Paddington Station, and you and I were remarking how well she looked. But do you think that there will be more events for Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall?
Well, there have been. I mean, the Queen hasn't been traveling really, with the odd exception, for 10 years now. So, I mean, they really have had to do a lot of the heavy lifting of the international travel.
Well, now that COVID-19 restrictions have lifted, so it's easier.
They did a few in the last little while, but now that's really going to ramp up. The difficulty is the number of members of the royal family have depleted with some very significant departures. So there's fewer of them, and there's just as much demand. I mean, there's demand within the Commonwealth, particularly the realms like Canada, where they actually have an official position. But there's also the Commonwealth is 54 nations, and then there's the British government's desire for them to travel on British government purposes for other trips. So it's going to be extremely difficult for them to satisfy all of that, and that's why we're seeing these very short, compacted visits with lots of things in a very, very short period of time.
The Prince of Charles getting another round of applause, waving to well-wishers and greeters as they get ready to depart.
And it looks like the Duchess picked up a bouquet of tulips, which is
lovely,
very appropriate
very fitting.
In Ottawa.
Yes. Let's take this sound. CTV's Kevin Gallagher is standing by at the Royals' next location this morning, Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral. Kevin, I hope you can hear me. How far away are you from downtown Ottawa, the War Memorial?
Well, it'd be about a 10 to maybe 15-minute drive, Marcia, but of course, the Prince and Duchess are traveling with a motorcade, so we do expect that could maybe shave a bit of that time. Now, this is a tight schedule today. We've been talking about it all morning, and they're running a little bit behind. So they were expected to be here just after 11 o'clock to be received here at the Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral. But, this, as we know, things can run behind schedule. So right now, of course, there has been a bit of a crowd gathering. It was a bit sleepier here earlier this morning, but now a few dozen people have showed up. There certainly have been people here of curious onlookers, but there are many people involved with the cathedral here, the Orthodox Church, that have been raising funds and raising awareness for the Ukrainian people who, of course, have been impacted so greatly by the conflict in their home country. Of course, Canada, home to a very large Ukrainian diaspora, 1.4 million or so. So we know that when Prince Charles and Camilla do arrive. They'll be received by the parish priest. That's Father Taras Kinash. And then he, of course, has recently come to Canada from Ukraine. It was a plan, of course, for him to take over this parish. He had been planning to come to Canada, and then Russia invaded Ukraine, and it became very difficult for Father Taras to get out of that country and come here to Canada. Of course, his first sermon the Saturday just before before Eastern Orthodox Easter. There also is the parish president. There's some masters of ceremonies here. The Ukrainian ambassador to Canada, Yulia Kovalev, is here as well to receive the Prince and Duchess, along with the First Secretary of the Ukrainian Embassy in Canada, as well as the President of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, as well as Member of Parliament for Etobicoke Centre, Yvonne Baker.
Okay, so the
is
motorcade has just left.
You see right there.
Yeah, the motorcade has just left. And once it arrives, we're going to come back to you, Kevin. So hang tight. Thank you so much for that.